Alright, let's see here. Your Subcourse OD1620, Edition 6, Principles of Gasoline Diesel Fuel Systems. Alright, Lesson 1, Functional and Constructional Gasoline Fuel Systems. Alright, Task 2, describe principal construction function gas fuel systems. 1. Introduction. The task illustrates the function of the gasoline fuel system. Will describe the principal function following components of the system: fuel tank, fuel filter, fuel pump, fuel tank, ventilation system, intake manifold, air filter, carburetor, carburetor choke system, related carburation components. A. Fuel tanks. Purpose of the fuel tank: of the source of the gasoline liquid form. The location of the fuel tank is dependent upon using the area. This is projected with flying debris, shielded with the collision to image, and note, not a subject to bottoming of the vehicle. Fuel tank can be located just about anywhere in the vehicle that meets these requirements. Construction. Fuel tanks take any form of the military vehicle, such as those described below. The removal of the fuel tank, figure 1, is most commonly used with wheel vehicles. Most common material of the fuel tanks is thin sheet metal coats coated with lead tin alloy to prevent corrosion. Because corrosion is a major concern, fiberglass variety molded plastics are widely used to manufacture fuel tanks. The walls of the tank manufactured with the ridges give strength with the internal baffles installed with the tank, prevent the fuel from sloshing to increase the overall strength. Some tanks are made with a double wall layer of latex rubber in between. The purpose of the wall is to make the tank self-sealing. Fuel cells are comparable compartments with the integral body of the hull of the vehicle. The fuel cell is located anywhere there is an empty space. They're used in vehicles that require large fuel storage capacity. Fuel cells take advantage of the hollow areas of the vehicle, whereas your removable fuel tank would be impractical. Fuel cells are particularly suited for combat situations because they may be located in areas provided with maximum shielding. Figure 1. Typical removal of the fuel tank. Construction: filler pipe, filler gauge, rigid strength, baffle, passage, fuel, drain plug, fuel, 1 inch. Alright, the bladder type of the fuel cell is much like the same as the fuel cell described above, except for the addition of the flexible liner. The liner serves as a cell that meets the inner tube of the cells of the tire. Filler pipe. A pipe provided with the filling of the tank of the cell designed to prevent the fuel from being spilled into the passenger engine cargo compartments. The filler pipes used for the military vehicles are designed to allow the tanks cells to be filled at a rate of at least 50 gallons per minute. Fuel outlet. The outlet pipe, figure 1, previous page, is located approximately 1/2 inch above the bottom of the fuel tank cell. Location allows sediment to fall to the bottom of the tank of the cell without being drawn into the fuel system. Fuel gauge provisions. Provisions usually made installing the fuel gauge provision usually for a form of flange hole. Drain plug. The threaded drain plug shown in figure 1 is provided at the bottom of the tank, draining and the cleaning of the tank. 3. Fuel filters. Purpose of fuel filters: trap foreign matter that must be present in the fuel with the preventing of the entry of the carburetor's sensitive fuel injection components. At least one fuel filter is used with any of the fuel system. A fuel filter can be located at accessible place along the fuel delivery line. Filters can also be located inside the fuel tanks, carburetor, fuel pumps. Operation: fuel filter, figure 2 on the following page. Operate passing fuel with a porous filter. Medium openings of the porous material that are very small. As a result, the particles in the fuel that are large enough to cover the problems are blocked. In addition to filtering medium, the filter is in most cases also served as a sediment bowl. The gasoline, as passed through the filter, remains in the sediment bowl for sufficient time to allow large particles of water to settle out of it. This shows your fuel filter illustration. Fuel enters through here, and then large moisture and settles in the bowl. The filter and traps the small particles. Fuel filter to the fuel to the carburetor. Alright, fuel filter configuration. Various types of fuel filters are: replaceable inline filter, figure 3, view A on the following page. Of the type of the filter, periodically replace with the body of the filter acts as sediment bowl. Inline filter elements that fit into the carburetor inside of the fuel tank of the outlet. Figure 3, view B on the following page. The filter is replaceable, but the intervals contain no sediment bowls. Glass bowl filter, replaceable element. View C on figure 3 on the following page. Sediment bowl must be washed out whenever the element is replaced. Some fuel pumps with the glass bowl type of gas filters are built in. Alright, it shows a replaceable inline filter, gas bowl filter, replaceable inline carburetor. Element configuration. Filter elements made with a ceramic treated with paper, the cinder, bronze, and metal screen. There is one filter element with a difference of all of the others. It consists of a pile laminated disc of 3/10,000 of an inch apart. The gasoline passes through the disc and foreign material is blocked out. Fuel pump. For the purpose of the fuel pump, deliver the gasoline fuel tank with the engine, automotive equipment with the gravity of the feed of the gasoline to the engine. It is no longer practical to cover the limits of the location of the fuel tank position that are above the engine. Mechanical type. The mechanical type of the fuel pump is generally the most popular for the gasoline applications, usually more than adequate. It's much cheaper than the electrical pump. The electrical pump is more desirable for the following reasons. The electric pump will supply the fuel to the engine immediately after the ignition key is turned on. The engine must be turned to the starter of the pump to operate. The pump design will operate with the most efficient to push the fuel rather than pulling it. Electrical pump can be mounted close to the tank or in the tank if it takes advantage of the characteristic. Electrical pump can be mounted away from the heat to reduce possibility of vapor lock. Alright, your mechanical non-positive type, figure 4 on the following page. This is currently the most popular configuration automotive fuel pump operation as follows. Rocker arm is moved up and down with the engine camshaft. The rocker arm springs cause for the rocker arm to follow with the cam lobe. The rocker arm hooks the elongated slot with the pull rod at the other end of the pull rod attached to the diaphragm. As the camshaft operates the rocker arm, it will operate with the diaphragm against the force of the diaphragm spring. If the rocker arm pulls the diaphragm down, the inlet check valve with the unseat of the fuel is drawn into the fuel pump chamber. The outlet check valve seals the outlet passage. If the diaphragm spring pushes the diaphragm back up, the inlet check valve seals an inlet in the fuel of the pump chamber is pushed through the outlet check valve through the pump outlet. The action is repeated each time the rocker arm operates the diaphragm. Figure 4 shows a mechanical non-positive type of fuel, starting with the pulsation chamber, the outlet check valve, diaphragm, spring, vent hole, oil seal, pull rod, cam chamber left, the rocker arm, spring, pump diaphragm, inlet, and inlet check valve. Alright, 7. Pressure will build up the fuel line with the pump chamber after the fuel pump filled with the carburetor bowl. As pressure rises with the desired level, the pump chamber will hold the diaphragm down again for the pressure of the diaphragm spring, and the rocker arm will move up and down in the slotted pull rod. There will be no pumping action until the fuel line pressure again drops below the desired level. In this way, the non-positive type of the fuel regulates the fuel line pressure. Normal pressure ranges in from 1.5 to 6 pounds per square inch. The operating range of the pump depends on the tension exerted with the pump diaphragm spring. The vent hole is provided with the diaphragm to allow pressure to change the lower chamber of the diaphragm flexes. A pulsation chamber located above the pump chamber uses a soft diaphragm and a sealed chamber to cushion the pulsation inherent within the diaphragm type pump. 10. An oil seal is provided to keep the crankcase oil entering the low chamber with the leaking of the vent hole. Alright, D, mechanical positive type. The positive type of the mechanical pump operates the same way with the non-positive type. The difference is that the diaphragm pull rod is solidly linked to the rocker arm of the pump, therefore not regulates the fuel line pressure. This type of the pump is used to separate pressure regulation devices. Must be employed with the bypass excess fuel back to the fuel tank. Your double action fuel pump, figure 5. Views of the vacuum-operated windshield wiper will often supply pump with a built-in fuel pump. Pump serves to operate windshield wiper during periods of high engine load. So your figure 5 shows your double-action pump. You have your vent pump output, vent pump inlet, your fuel pump inlet, your fuel pump outlet. The manifold of the vacuum is low. Pump operates with the rocker arm and non-positive diaphragm type of the time is the manifold vacuum alone sufficient to operate with the windshield wiper. The diaphragm will held up against the diaphragm spring with the atmospheric pressure rendering the pump inoperative. Electrical bellow type. Bellow type of electrical fuel pumps in such a manner with the non-positive type of the mechanical pump. The difference is that the drawn electrical solenoid rather than a mechanical camshaft. Operation is followed. Electrical current is fed with the pump. The electronic magnet coil pulls the armature down, expanding with the bellows. The expansion of the bellows causes the fuel drawn through the inlet valve. Figure 6 shows the bell type electrical pump. Show the inlet valve, the bellows, the armature, the electrical coil, the contact points, outlet valve, return spring, out, contact points, outlet stroke. After the bellows are fully expanded with the pair of the contact points, or for the open switching with the electric magnet with the return spring, push for the armature back with the contracting valve with the action, pushes the fuel out of the pump through the outlet valve with the contact points, or close with the bellows, fully contract with the coil of the electromagnet to pull the armature down, breeding pump process. The pump will stop at the fuel pressure high enough to hold the bellows expanded against the return spring with the operating pressure of the pump to determine the return spring pressure. 5. Your fuel tank ventilation system. Purpose of the fuel tank designed with the ventilation system keep the pressure equal to the atmospheric pressure. The important of the fuel reason the air must be allowed to enter the tank of the fuel with the pumped out with the ventilation of the tank. The pressure of the tank would drop to the point where the fuel pump would not be able to draw the fuel from it. In some cases, the high pressure around the outside of the tank causes it to collapse. Temperature changes cause the fuel tank to expand when the contract absence of ventilation could cause excessive insufficient fuel line pressure. Configurations. The most common method of venting of the fuel tank are by venting the fuel tank cap of the atmosphere. The method most commonly earlier passenger cars and trucks is still used in vehicles not subject to emission control regulations that are not used for forwarding. 2. Providing a line of fuel tank that vents the fuel tank at the point high enough to prevent water entering the forwarding water. 3. Vehicles are subject to the emission control regulations have fuel tank ventilation systems that work in conjunction with the evaporation control system. 6. Intake manifold. Description Figure 7 that properly designed the intake manifold should perform the following functions. Fuel air mixture is dotted, carburetor mounting flange, and then this shows the cylinder passages. Deliver to the mixture cylinder with the early quantity of the portion of the important of the smooth engine performance. The length of the passage should be near equal to possible to distribute the mixture equally. Help to keep vaporized mixture with the condensing before the reach of the combustion chamber. The cover of the idle mixture should be vaporized completely with the engine of the combustion chamber. That is very important with the reduced condensation of the mixture. Manifold passage should be designed to smooth out the walls and minimum bends which collect fuel, showing flowing. Smooth flowing intake manifold passage also increase volumetric efficiency. 3. And add-in vaporization of mixture to do with this intake manifold should provide a controlled system. The heating of this system must heat the mixture enough to aid in vaporization with the heating of the point with a significant reducing volumetric efficiency. Alright, ram induction. Intake manifolds can be designed to provide an optimum performance to give the engine speed varying from the length of the passage in air with a moving intake mixture will cause to bounce back and forth the manifold passage from end of the intake stroke to the beginning of the next intake stroke. And if the passage of the proper length of the next time the intake stroke will just begin with a mixture with the rebounding, the inerrant mixture will cause cause it to ram itself into the cylinder. This will increase the volumetric efficiency engine with a designated speed range. It should be noted the ram manifold it will serve the useful purpose outside of the desired speed range. Heating the mixture. Provided with the controlled heating of the income mixture with important good performance. Heating of the mixture must be accomplished one or both of the following. Direct proportion exhaust passage with the intake manifold. Figure 8. The heats of the exhaust diverted into the intake manifold heat passages. Controlled manifold heat control. Figure 8 shows exhaust head intake risers path followed by exhaust gases and the exhaust filler. 2. Directing engine coolant. Which of the latent engine heat through the intake manifold is on its way to the radiator? Alright, 7. Air filter. Purpose of the air filter fits on over the engine air intake of the filter out part is foreign material into the intake, which will embrace between the cylinder wall piston, generally with a shortened engine life. 2 types of filters used: the wet and dry type. The wet type, oil bath air filter consists of the main body filter element made of woven copper gauze. Then the cover. The operation valve of the incoming air enters between the cover of the main body and pulls to the bottom of the main body, where it must be a 180-degree turn as it passes over the oil reserve. As the air passes over the oil reserve, most of the particles will not make the turn. They will hit the oil and be trapped. As the air continues upward past through the filter element, small particles that bypass the oil will be trapped. They keep the filter element soaked in the oil by creating fine spray and bypass to the reservoir. Air finally makes another 180-degree turn into the carburetor. For your dry type, figure 9 on the following page. Dry type of the air filter passes the incoming through the filter medium before it enters the engine. The filter medium consists of oil-soaked copper mesh with replaceable pleated paper, the latter being most common. Composition of the air. Air is composed of the various passages, mostly nitrogen oxide, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen by volume. These gases composed of tiny particles of them called molecules. All are substances that around the Earth. The molecules are able to move quite freely in relation to each other, and all gases the molecules of air are attracted to the Earth by gravity, creating the atmosphere with the weight of the air molecules, great atmospheric pressure. Alright, figure 9 shows the dry type air filters, copper mesh, and then the pleated paper. Evaporation. Evaporation is changing a liquid to vapor. The molecule of the liquid not closely tied together, the concept of the movement among themselves, with any molecule that move upward sufficient speed with the jump out of the liquid into the air. The process will cause liquid to evaporate over the period of time. The rate of the evaporation depending on the following temperature. The rate of the movement of the molecules increases within the temperature because of the amount of the molecules leaving the liquid given the time will increase with the temperature. Increase with the atmospheric pressure increases the amount of the air molecules present over the liquid are increased. Also increase. The increased presence of the air molecules slow the rate of evaporation. This because of the molecules liquid will have air molecules to collide with. In many cases, they will fall back into the liquid after collision. Closed chamber. An evaporation takes place with a closed container space of the liquid, which point where saturation, which happens in every molecule liquid enters the air, will cause another airborne molecule liquid to fall back. Volatility. The term volatility refers to how fast the liquid vaporized with the alcohol instant vaporized more easily than water. Some of the liquid vaporized easily with the room temperature. High volatile liquid is one that can serve to evaporate easily. Or your Venturi effect, figure 10. Venturi effect is used with the carburetor mixing gasoline with air, with the mixing that basic carburetor with the hourglass shape of the tube of the throat. But the most constricted part of the throat is called the Venturi. The tube called with the discharge nozzle position in the Venturi. Discharge nozzle is connected with the reservoir with the gasoline called a float bowl with a negative pressure that exists with the combustion chamber that because of the downward intake stroke of the piston cover the atmospheric pressure to create an airflow through the carburetor throat with the airflow must increase the temperature spread of the passage through the Venturi due to its decreased size. The increased speed of the airflow will also result in the corresponding increase of the pressure of the Venturi at the end of the discharge nozzle will often, which occur with the atmospheric pressure with the gasoline through the discharge nozzle of the carburetor throat will mix with the intake airflow. Figure 10 shows Venturi effect, air horn, discharge nozzle, Venturi airspeed up, causing the corresponding pressure to drop, atmospheric pressure, fuel out of the discharge nozzle. A basic carburetor. The ideal state of the fuel with the reach of the cylinder of the vaporized complete with a good intake manifold. The design will help vaporize with the fuel, but carburetor must properly atomize with the fuel beforehand. Atomization fuel occurs with the drawn with the into the Venturi with the fuel comes out with the discharge nozzle. It's broken within the tiny droplets which enter the airflow to ensure that there's a high degree of atomization. Tiny hole called the air bleed is used to allow air to mixture with the flow of the discharge tube. The fuel is then further atomized to enter the Venturi with the ensure the proper fuel and secondary Venturi or a Venturi booster may be used. It will further decrease the pressure of the discharge nozzle. Or your airflow mixture. The proportion of airflow mixture with the expressed in terms of the airflow to ratio relationship of the weight of the mixture. For example, how it will be expressed with the airflow minus fuel ratio is equal to 12 to 1. The airflow mixture with the air will be 12 times heavier with the fuel with the operation range. The airflow ratio of the average gasoline engine air approximately 9 to 1. Approximately 17 to 1 airflow ratio is lower or less considered the rich mixture. Airflow ratio is higher and more air are considered to be lean mixtures. The gasoline engine properly with a vehicle with a steady speed operates the air-fuel ratio approximately 15 to 1. Consider the gasoline weighs approximately 640 times as much as air. It can be seen with a gasoline engine consumes a tremendous amount of air. In fact, with the airflow ratio with a considerable volume rather than weight, it would be the gasoline engine operating air-fuel ratio 15 to 1 consumes approximately 9,600 gallons of airflow for every gallon of gasoline. Alright, your construction of the basic carburetor. The throttle valve with figure 11 the following. And the throttle valve is used to regulate the speed of the power output of the engine is controlled with the accelerator pedal. Used to consist of the flat round plate that tilts the throttle shaft. The accelerator pedal is fully depressed. The throttle valve is moved to the position complete with restricting the throttle with being completely open. Idle stop screw is used to keep the throttle valve open slightly so the engine running at a regulated idle speed with no foot pressure on the accelerator. The screw may be turned in or out to regulate engine idle speed. Shows the idle stop screw the throttle valve of the engine mixture into the accelerator operator throttle valve. Alright, your float circuit. Purpose of the float circuit maintains steady working supply with the gasoline constant fluid level in the carburetor. The very critical with a proper engine performance success with high float levels will cause the fuel to flow freely with the discharge tube, causing an overly rich mixture, whereas the excessively float level will cause over lean mixture. Operation. Figure 12 of the following page. Fuel pump delivers gasoline under pressure to the carburetor. The following events occur with the gasoline with the carburetor through the fuel inlet. The gasoline begins to fill. Float bowl, float rise with level of gasoline. Figure 12 shows flow cycle, needle valve, pivot, float, and fuel inlet. Needle valve, float, fuel float, and pivot, and fuel inlet. The needle valve is covered with the rising of the float over the fuel reaching the desired level in float bowl. 3. The engine with the gasoline float bowl level will drop. Will cause the float to drop, which will open the needle valve to let in more fuel. Venting. Figure 13 of the following page. The pressure in the float bowl must be regulated to ensure the proper delivery of the fuel with the purging of the vapor. The following system devices are added to the floating circuits to provide these needs. Are the balance tube, the restriction pole with the air filter, with the change with the air velocity, with the recover the varying engine speed, with the air pressure, with the air horn usually lower with the atmospheric pressure. Pressure of the float bowl must be equal to the air horn in order for the carburetor to provide fuel delivery. Tube called with the balance tube is run between the air horn and float bowl to accomplish this task. Figure 13 shows the controlling fuel bowl pressure balance tube and the geek life of the pressure between the float and the bowl and the air horn. Ideal vent occur with the throttle linkage fuel. Alright, the idle vent. Because the gasoline is high volatile, it can create over-rich mixture during a long period with the engine idle. Because the fuel begins to evaporate when the float bowl with the vapor gets into the air horn through the balance tube. The solution with the problem has the outside vent for the float bowl, which is open whenever the engine is idling. The idle vent is activated with the linkage of the throttle valve. The idle vent is later on vehicles may make an immersion control system. Part 10. System of the carburetor. 2 operating systems of the carburetor. Each contains 2 circuits that provide flexibility operating throughout the entire engine speed range. Both of the systems obtain gasoline with the float bowl through the main jet. Figure 14 of the following page. The main jet is precisely sized open that helps govern the amount of fuel used. The main jet is usually replaceable, available the variety of size of the carburetor is tailored with the many various speed with the varying jet sizes. In addition to above, the carburetor must provide the other system with the compensation temperature change, quick change, and throttle composition. 14 show the main jet, fuel and fuel air mixture, main jet. Your idle low speed systems. Purpose. The idle and low speed system provides proper air fuel mixture when the engine is idling during other periods. A small throttle opening during these periods. There is not enough air flowing through the throat to make discharge nozzle work. Operating filters. Figure 15 following page. Idle and low speed portion of the system readily separate circuits for the operation idle circuit. Sustains engine idle as the throttle begins to open and the effectiveness idle circuit falls and gradually the low speed circuit takes over. Transition between the 2 circuits is the smooth one. Operation engine idle speed with low speed range as follows. Throttle valve is almost closed with the engine idle with the creates with a high vacuum area with the carburetor under the throttle valve. High vacuum causes the atmospheric pressure to push the gasoline through the idle port with the float bowl with the gasoline mixture with the air that is drawn around with the throttle valve. The mixture is drawn into the engine. Figure 15 shows the idle and low speed systems of air bleed, ventry, offside port, throttle valve, idle mixture, idle port, fuel and fuel air mixture. Alright, as the throttle valve is open, the vacuum under the beginning of the falls off, causing less gasoline to draw with the idle port as more air follows for the throat with the gasoline being flow with a low speed oval off idles discharge port with usually with the shape of the rectangular slot with a screw with the 2 or 3 holes. During a low-speed system operation, there's still not enough airflow through the throat of the discharge nozzle to work. Alright, 3. The idle mixture screw with the new shape of the screw with the U with the carburetor to regulate with the idle port opening. The airflow ratio of the idle system can be adjusted by turning the screw in and out. Air bleeds are used to idle some low-speed circuits to help atomize the fuel. Your passage to the float bowl. The passage supplied with the idle and low speed must at some point be higher than the level of the gasoline in the float bowl. The passage will straight the idle and low speed ports. Float bowl will be able to drain them through them. Alright, your high-speed enrichment circuits. Purpose of the high-speed circuit with the supply of the fuel air mixture for the engine during the medium full throttle of the opening with a high-speed engine. High-speed circuit gradually will take over the low-speed circuit with the throttle with the carburetor designed to provide approximately 16 to 1 to 17 to 1 airflow ratio under normal and steady speed conditions. The high-speed enrichment circuit will enrich the mixture with approximately 11 to 1 to 12 to 1 if the heavy demand is placed on the engine. Operation. Figure 16. A high-speed circuit takes the gasoline with the float bowl with the main jet with the gasoline with the fed through the passenger with the discharge nozzle with the wedge and 6 with the air in the ventry. Open the throttle valve with accelerating engine speed. Increase the airflow with the venturi, which causes the proportionate increase in the amount of gasoline discharge nozzle. High-speed enrichment system increase the fuel flow of the discharge nozzle, either increasing the main jet. Figure 16 shows the high-speed system. Fuel-air mixture, main jet size adjusted with a metering rod. Opening providing secondary supply with the fuel with the float bowl. 3 basic high-speed enrichment systems. Power jet with vacuum operating metering rod. A mechanically operating meter rod. Are the power jet shown in figure 17. Power jet system include the jet that is open with a vacuum operated piston. Jet provides extra supply with the fuel with the discharge nozzle with the float bowl. When the throttle valve is not open, there will be a manifold vacuum because the carburetor throw is restricted. This high vacuum manifold vacuum is used to hold the vacuum piston against the spring. When the piston is up, the spring in the power joint will hold it closed. The throttle valve is open with the extra power demand causing drop of the manifold. As the manifold vacuum drop the spring on the vacuum. Figure 17 shows the vacuum power piston, the vacuum channel, the in throttle valve, the bypass jet valve, and the vacuum piston spring. Piston pushes the piston down. When the turn pushes the power valve open, the power jet, sometimes referred to as economizer, and the vacuum piston step up with the power piston. Vacuum operated metering rod. Vacuum operating metering rod with the diameter progressively large and steps in from its end with the vacuum operated with the metering rod. When the engine load is light but the manifold vacuum is high, piston pushes the metering rod into the jet against the spring pressure, restricting the flow to the discharge tube. When the load demand increases, the manifold vacuum decreases cover the spring lift the metering rod out of the jet, progressively increasing the fuel flow discharge tube. Figure 18 shows the vacuum operating meter rod, the cylinder and the piston, the jet, the spring, piston spring, the vacuum entrance, the metering rod. Mechanically operated metering rod, figure 19, the following page of the mechanically operated metering rod works by same principles as vacuum operated metering rod, except they operated by a linkage through throttle valve. The linkage is calibrated so the metering rod regulates fuel perfectly for each throttle position. Alright, mechanically operated metering rod, show the metering rod and jet thrower closed, throttle open. Alright, your accelerator pump circuit. Purpose for the throttle valve with it suddenly open, there is the corresponding sudden increase of the speed airflow through the carburetor because the air is lighter, but the gasoline will accelerate quicker, causing a very lean mixture reach of the engine from the reef period with the result of the severe lack engine performance able to not for accelerator pump circuit. It's just its job is to inject the measured charge of the gasoline into the carburetor throttle when the throttle valve is open. Operation: accelerator pump circuit. It consists of a pump that operates with a link directly with the throttle valve. There are passageway that connect to the pump with the float bowl with the pump discharge nozzle. 2 check valves and system control of the direction of the gasoline operation is followed with the pumps pushed down in the pump chamber that as the throttle valve is open forces the gasoline through the outlet passage. B, the inlet check valve will seat, keeping the gasoline for the being pumped back into the float bowl. Outlet check for the valve will be forced out of the seat, allowing the gasoline to pass the pump discharge nozzle where it will be discharged in the throat. D, the pump it will be raised with the chamber with the throttle valve with the closed with the causing outlet check valve with the seat, and then blocking the passageway. Inlet check valve was pulled off the sheet with the gasoline pulling the chamber to the float bowl. The pump chamber is filled with the gasoline ray. The discharge rim with the throttle is open. Diaphragm pump, figure 20 on the following page. The diaphragm type of the system works similar to piston type of the exemption of the pump that is included with the flat rubber diaphragm. Flexing this diaphragm pressure differential is created with the result of the pumping action. For the control pump discharge, linkage between the accelerator pump and the throttle cannot be solid. If it were, the pump would act as a damper, not allowing throttle to be open, closed readily. With the linkage usually activates the pump solid shaft with something similar. With the throttle is closed, the pump is held up by its linkage. Throttle is open, the pump is activated, being pushed down by a spring called the duration spring. The tension of the duration spring control the length of the time the injection fuel lasts. The spring is calibrated specific application to much spring pressure will cause the fuel to discharge too quickly, result of the reduced fuel economy. The too little springs pressure will cause the fuel to discharge slowly, resulting in engine hesitation. E, choking system. Purpose for the engine is cold, but the gasoline tends to condense into large drops in the manifold rather than vaporize it by supplying with a richer mixture 8-to-1 to 9-to-1. There will be enough vapor to ensure the complete combustion of the carburetor filled with the choke system provided with a richer mixture. Choke system provides a very rich mixture starting with a cold engine with a gradually make the mixture with the engine speed. Engine reach operating temperature. So the figure 20 shows the diaphragm accelerator pump. Alright, figure 2, operation. Figure 21 on the following page. The choke system consists of a flat plate with a restricted throw of the ventry, but is located with the place and below the balance tube of the head of the effect of the pressure of the float bowl of the plate is called the choke valve, with the little of the throttle valve is mounted with the shaft till open and closed. Figure 21 shows the check valve operation. Check valve admits air, check valve blocks air, open and closed. Alright, manual choke system, figure 22 of the following page. The manual operated choke with the most common method of controlling of the choke valve due to the emission of the regulation, possible change of the catalytic converter, tactical advantage of the automatic choke system. Manual choke system are little used today. In manual system, choke valve is operated with flexible cable to extend into the driver's compartment. The control is pulled out. Choke valve will be closed and so that the engine can be started. As the control is pushed back in, position of choke valve adjusts to provide with the proper mixture following the 2 feature of the incorporated with the manual choke system reduce possibility of engine flooding automatically admitting the air to the engine. 3A. The spring-loaded pop the valve is automatically pulled on the open force of the engine intake. The choke valve is the pivot of the center of the shaft with the crave of the pressure differential between 2 sides of the choke valve when it's subject with the air into engine intake, causing it to be pulled open again with the force and spring-like linkage. Figure 22 shows a manual choke system with a spring and the air choke and the pop the valve with the control cable and knob. Automatic choke system 23 with the automatic choke control system presented with the thermostatic coil spring serve the pressure hold of the choke valve clove the head pleat with the heat is applied with the coil after the engine start with the heat cover the coil to expand allowing the choke to open. Providing automatic choke heat with the 4 methods of providing controlled heat with the automatic choke with thermostatic spring are electricity. Figure 24, the portion of the vehicle with the currently produced with the electrical coil to permit heat the thermostatic coil spring. The heating of the coil spring and switch is on the ignition switch. Some of the systems control unit to prevent power with the reaching electrical coil until the engine compartment to reach the desired temperature. Show the your choke system on the thermostatic coil spring and the ignition switch. Engine coolant. Figure 25 of the following page and of the method of the heating of the thermostatic coil with the circulating engine coolant through the patch of the thermostatic housing. Alright, and then C, your intake manifold. Figure 26 on the following page. One of the most popular methods of providing choke heat until the recent year of the utilizing exhaust heat. Usually, a way of doing this is mount with a choke mechanism containing the thermostatic coil with the molded well on the intake manifold over the crossover massage. Choke mechanism then operates the choke valve through the linkage. So 25 shows your engine coolant heated circuit with the choke housing and the thermostatic cool housing. Hot coolant exits, hot coolant enters, and your well type exhaust heated choke, which show the choke valve, the thermostatic cool rod, the thermostatic coil, the exhaust manifold. The exhaust manifold, figure 27 of the system head with the choke mechanism mounted with the carburetor sealed housing and the choke housing connected with the tube with the run through the exhaust manifold, the tube with the supply with the heat with the choke mechanism with the choke housing also connected to internal manifolds, vacuum source with the engine run with the manifold, vacuum draw with the air with the heat with the choke housing, the heat tube with the passenger ride with the exhaust manifold as it takes the fresh air with the in with the choke stove that will pick up the heat with the exhaust without sending any actual exhaust fumes to the choke mechanism, heating the flush air with the insert of the heat tube to curb the choke stove. So 27 show the heat tube choke, show the choke valve, the vacuum passage, intake manifold, choke housing, thermostatic coil heat pipe from choke stove, the fresh air, the exhaust manifold, fresh air, and then the choke stove, and then fresh air. Regulating choke valve open. After the manual choke system device must be incorporated, will open the choke of the measured amount with against the force of the thermostatic coil of the manifold vacuum. Usually used to operate choke device. Choke piston can be integral with the carburetor. Can be passed to supply with a vacuum in it into the vacuum passages situated on the side of the piston cylinder so that it would only pull the choke valve with the desired amount before the piston cover the vacuum of the passage of the back. This will vacuum block. Keep the piston moving any further. B. Choke piston integral choke housing. Choke piston system has integrated with the choke heating system, and this is done by putting the choke piston into the choke housing. As the manifold vacuum pull with the piston, open the choke linkage around the piston, allow the same with the vacuum source to pull the heated air over the choke. Alright, C. Remote choke pull-off. The remote choke pull-off is the most of the common configuration concurrent with the automotive design, maybe either the metal or plastic or even the rubber diaphragm pull with the choke open through the large linkage, adjusting opening of the proper choke valve with the opening lever with the choke shaft with the slide with the not interfere with the choke valve opening. Two-stage choke pull-off. The variation choke pull-off, the two-stage choke pull-off with the spring load with the telescope and the pull rod, the choke valve with the beginning will be pulled open only partially at the thermostatic coil heave and relaxes, it will become overpressure. Over the spring telescopic pull rod, the choke valve will open further. The design provided with more precise control of the properly with the emission control vehicles. 7. The fast idle cam, figure 28 in the following page. Choke with the system that during the warm-up, the engine must run faster, idle with the speed that improves the drivability, preventing flooding. Accomplished if the carburetor is fitted with the fast idle cam operated with linkage from its choke with the fast idle cam operated with the holding of the throttle valve open. As the choke valve gradually opens, the cam rotates and gradually reducing idle speed. Figure 28 shows the fast idle cam operation. Choke valve, fast idle cam, top screw, cold starting position, warm up position, cam lever lock more freely, hot position. Alright, your choke unloader. If some of the reason engine should flood with the skull of the device need to open the choke with the airflow made admitted with the correct of the condition, the device accomplished for the choke with the unloader. The choke unloader consists of the projection from the fast idle cam and the interact with the throttle linkage with the operation valve. As the throttle valve is open, the projection of the throttle valve will contact with the projection of the fast idle cam and the throttle lever. Then can the fast idle cam then pulls the choke valve open a measured amount. Multi-venturi carburation. General multi-venturi, multi-barrel carburetors is really a carburetor that has 2 or 4 separate single-venturi carburetors arranged with a cluster in most cases with a common choke float with accelerator pump system. Purpose of the 2 reasons for the using multi-venturi carburation. Use of the 2 separate carburetors feeding a separate cylinder that can help improve the fuel distribution. The operation range of the engine can be increased with the drivability, improved with the throttle linkage range to the phase of the carburetor venturi that is gradually with the accelerated pedal depressed. There are 2 basic arrangements of throttle linkage depending on purpose having multi-venturi carburation linkage arrangement that is discussed in the next 2 paragraphs. Fixed throttle linkage, figure 29. Fixed throttle linkage is most commonly used with the 2 venturi, 2-barrel carburetors engines containing 6 or more cylinders. Linkage arrangement is usually installed on the intake manifold arranged to each of the venturi for the leading of the select half of the cylinder for the separation of the carburetor. Venturies within the intake manifold usually keep the consecutively operating cylinders separate. Whenever the 2 cylinders go through the power stroke consecutively, the second of the 2 cylinders tends to have the fuel full supply cut off. The fixed throttle linkage arrangement, solid throttle shaft operated with both throttle valves simultaneously. The idle mixture screws on each side of the carbureted accelerator pump discharge nozzle usually contains 2 outlets. So 2-barrel carburetor fixed linkage show the both throttles operating simultaneously. Our progressive throttle linkage. Progressive throttle linkage is set up with them open when the throttle valve. One set of the throttle valve to have at the beginning of the link travel debate and begin with the opening of the second throttle valve. Set for the throttle valve with the first with the 2/3 open. The geometry of the linkage is set up with the throttle reach of the full open point, but all of the throttle valves will be wide open. The purpose is to provide the carburetor with a venturi small enough to provide good throttle response, fuel economy, low speed, yet large enough to carburate the operative low speed called the primary section. The section operates high speed called the secondary section. It should be noted that the primary section of the carburetor works throughout the engine operational range. It should be noted that the secondary section of the carburetor has no choke accelerator pump, low speed, idle, and high speed enrichment systems. These systems are unnecessary in the secondary section carburetor of the following reasons. Secondary section of the carburetor is located on that the throttle valves will not open the choke system operational primary side of the carburetor. As the speed of the engine operating with the secondary section of the carburetor begins to operate, there will be no hesitation which makes the acceleration pump system necessary. Alright, because the secondary section of the carburetor only operates with a high speed, it does not have the jet of the 2-stage operation, therefore will not require high-speed enrichment system. D. Because the secondary section carburetor operates only with a high-speed, low-speed idle system as are necessary. There are numerous devices system linkage that use to make up the secondary section of the carburetor There will be discussed in the following paragraphs. Progressive linkage configuration. Carburation equipped with the progressive linkage designed with the accelerator pedal directly operated with the primary throttle valve. There's 2 ways in which the secondary throttle valves are operated. Mechanically or operated secondary throttle with figure 30 are actuated linkage primary throttle valve linkage is designed so they will not be actuated with the primary throttle valve. Approximately 2/3 open operating arm on the primary throttle shaft is made with approximately 3 times as long as the arm on the secondary throttle. And it shows your mechanical progressive linkage. Throttle closed, throttle 1/3, throttle 2/3 open, fully open. Shaft of the secondary throttle valve will open all the way during with the third throttle and final third, but the primary throttle valve will open with the operating arm on the secondary throttle shaft operates through the spring so that it will not interfere with the primary throttle operating choke lockout is engaged. Your vacuum-operated secondary throttle, figure 31, are actuated vacuum diaphragm vacuum source to prevent venturi principal operation engine speed, increase the vacuum in the primary venturi, increase the cause of the diaphragm to pull. The secondary throttle valves open in a second, and linkage between the primary and secondary throttle valves in relation to primary throttle valves. Pass the supply of vacuum to diaphragm. Diaphragm pulls the valve open, vacuum progressive linkage, and then in secondary air valve, figure 32 for the carburetors equipped with mechanically operated secondary throttle valves are subject to engine hesitation. Throttles suddenly open all the way to low engine speed with the following reasons. Secondary air valve operation. Airflow with insufficient full open. Secondary air valve. Airflow secondary valve open. Full throttle low engine speed. Full throttle at high engine speed. The opening of the primary and secondary throttle valves are provided with too much venturi with the engine handle with a low speed that will not be able to move enough air through the venturi to properly draw fuel from the discharge tube, causing lean mixture. Secondary section carburetor is not equipped with the accelerator pump, which will cover the engine hesitation, low speed, correct the deficiency. Most carburetor with mechanical progressive linkage secondary air valve. The secondary air valve fits into the secondary throat and serves to restrict the airflow through the secondary venturi until the engine is high enough speed to use it correctly with the valve actuated vacuum under it, which pulls it open against a spring force. And 7. The 4-barrel carburetor, figure 33. The 4-barrel, the 4-venturi carburetor consists of 2 primary venturies, fixed throttle with the shaft with a progressive link, 2 secondary venturies. They are also on fixed throttle shaft with a 4-barrel carburetor commonly used for a V8 engine configuration for the following reasons. The figure 3 shows the typical 4-barrel carburetor, primary throttle valves, secondary throttle valves, the choke shaft lever, the choke valve, air horn, venturi tube setup, piston cover, the accelerator, pump sink, first fast idle connection rod, fast idle cam, lever, throttle lever, the fast idle adjusting screw, pump and connector rod, high speed adjusting screen, accelerator pump and arm, and an idle mixture screw. Alright, the intake manifold may be divided into 2 separate consecutive cylinders. The carburetor serve the engine better throughout the entire load and speed range. Updraft, downdraft, side shaft carburation. Figure 34 on the following page. Carburetors may be built so that the airflow with the throttle valve is downward, upward, sideways, as shown in figure 34. H. Primer system. Some gasoline engine fitted with the primer system as the air cold starting of the primer system consists on the hand pump of the forcing gasoline with the line injecting critical locations along the intake manifold. System is not used with very much modern equipment. Figure 34 show the updraft, downdraft, side draft carburetors. Alright, your degasser system. Degasser system is designed to shut off the supply with the fuel idle circuit with whenever the high manifold vacuum, such as period deceleration, preventing a large amount of the fuel from being drawn into the engine through idle port. The degasser system consists of the needle valve spring with a hole for the needle valve, open vacuum of the diaphragm that operates with the needle valve through the fulcrum. The diaphragm is operated with the manifold vacuum during periods of normal engine idle speed. With the manifold vacuum is not high enough to operate with the diaphragm with the needle valve remains open during the periods of deceleration. The manifold vacuum is high enough to cover the diaphragm to close with the needle valve, shutting off the idle system. Needle valve will also be closed with the pushing of the button on the instrument panel. Energize the solenoid closed with the needle valve. The purpose of the manual actuation device is to clear the idle circuit and the manifold unburned gases before the engine is turned off. Accessory system. The numerous devices that use with the carburetors improve the durability with the economy. The application varies with the vehicle. The vehicle following paragraphs list the most common of the devices. Alright, your hot idle compensator, figure 35. The hot idle compensator is a thermostatically controlled valve that helps prevent engine stalling with the idle vent and when idling very hot weather. Long periods of engine idle cause the excessive amount of vaporization gasoline in the float bowl. Vapors will find their way into the carburetor throat that cover the overly rich mixture of the hot idle compensator consists of a bimetallic strip of metal which operated the valve with control of the air passages under the throttle valve, and bimetallic strip which consists of 2 pieces of dissimilar metal with a different expansion rate will curl upwards of the temperature, increasing the open valve. This will in turn emit the air under the throttle valve while compensating overly rich meters. So shows your hot idle air valve bimetallic strip, the secondary throttle valve. 2. Throttle return dash pot. Figure 36 of the following page. The throttle return of the dash pot with the axe for the damper for the key of the throttle for the closing. Too quickly accelerated throttle suddenly release This is important preventing stalling when the car is equipped with the automatic transmission throttle level to contact with the dash pot rod just before the throttle valve is closed. This will return the turn point of the push of the diaphragm and the diaphragm slow with the closing throttle push because it must exhaust the air to the chamber through a tiny valve when the throttle opens again with the dash pot spring pushes the diaphragm back into the operating position, drawing air into the chamber. Our figure 36 shows the return dash pot, the throttle linkage and throttle lever and linkage, diaphragm spring rod, vent hole, and mounting bracket. Or your anti-diesel solenoid. Figure 37 on the following page. With the anti-diesel solenoid, control the throttle opening engine out to prevent dieseling. Engine dieseling condition with the car of the engine continuing running after the engine ignition switch is turned off. It is a particular problem with emission control vehicles due to high operation temperature, high idle speed, low mean fuel mixtures, low octane gasoline. Solenoid is energized when the ignition switch is turned on, causing the plunger to open the throttle with the idle speed position. The plunger length is adjustable, so the idle speed can be adjusted when the ignition switch is turned off. The solenoid is de-energized and the throttle closes tightly, cutting off the airflow. Make sure this will keep the engine running from dieseling. Air conditioned solenoid, figure 37. The air conditioner solenoid is used with the sum of the engine to boost the engine's idle speed whenever the air conditioner compressor is running. They compensate for the load placed on the engine, preventing stalling. Its operation is similar to the anti-diesel solenoid described above. So you'd have your anti-diesel air conditioned solenoid operation. So throttle lever, idle speed adjustment, de-energizer, solenoid power lead, and then you have your throttle open and energized. Alright, your idle solenoid system, figure 38 on the following page. Idle solenoid system, same purpose with the degasser system. You with the solenoid when the operating cylinder with the nose over the two suppressed seating paragraph of the solenoid operate with the needle valve that opens closes the carburetor idle port. Needle valve is normally closed with the position solenoid activated with the ignition switch. The needle valve is normally closed with the position solenoid with the ignition switch turned on the opening of the needle valve. The purpose of shutting of the idle system with the engine help eliminate engine dieseling. Sensing switch is located with the intake manifold to shut off the idle speed system whenever the manifold vacuum is excessively hot to prevent excessive amounts of fuel from being soaked into an idle port during deceleration. Figure 38 shows an idle solenoid system. Your heated air intake system. More later models fitted with a heated air intake system provided the higher best performance in all temperatures, leaner fuel mixture. Heated air intakes use the damper door with the air filter snorkel to select each of the cold, fresh air intake. Heated air is ducted with a heat stove with external exhaust manifold. The damper door with its move with the diaphragm operates the manifold vacuum. Position with the damper door to determine the temperature sensor of the system will keep the temperature of the intake of about 100 to 115 degrees. Operations fouls. When the inlet temperature is below 100 degrees, the temperature sensor will allow the vacuum to flow over the operating diaphragm, pulling the damper door heated air position. When that air is over 115 degrees, the temperature sensor will bleed manifold vacuum off of the atmosphere. This will cause the diaphragm spring to push the damper door to an unheated fresh air position. And that was, and then skip the page. See, the temperature sensor will at times bleed off any of the portion of the vacuum, causing the damper door to remain between the hot and cold position. Will regulate the temperature, providing bleeding of the hot and cold air. Where the engine is heavily accelerated, the manifold vacuum will drop, the damper door will move in the fresh air intake position. 11. Conclusion. The task covered in the principal construction function, gasoline fuel system compression, lesson 1. Lesson 2, the functional and the construction of diesel fuel system will be covered, beginning with the discussion characteristics of diesel fuel before proceeding to the lesson 2. However, the test, your knowledge in lessons 1 may be completing the practical exercises that follows. Testing.